So before you two talk, we're going to have a live voting again, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have a question, please. All right, so I'm going to ask you the question, read out the possible answers, and when I say please vote now, you vote with a little voting device that's attached to your chair. All right? So our question is, artificial intelligence is going to change the tourism industry. What is your take on using AI in our industry? I think it has more advantages than disadvantages, would be number one. Number two, it has advantages and disadvantages. Three, it has more advantages, disadvantages than advantages. Got a lot of advantage in there. Please vote now. Do you have any idea what the result will be?
Yes, we know.
Oh, you know.
Oh, you
know. Oh, he knows. So let's see. Well, he can always say, yeah, that's what I thought.
I was right.
Two, he was right. Well then, have a great talk.
Thank you. Well, who would have thought you'd be sitting in the afternoon in a seminar on artificial intelligence, data, how this can change advertising and so on. And I'm sure some of you are sitting there fairly skeptical. So before we jump into the interview with Alex, who is a great privilege to have Alex with us, I want to convince some of you doubters that data analysis and predictive analytics and algorithms are really important for your business. So I'm sure you're very good at understanding data, but I'm going to try a small experiment. And there are 3 rules for this experiment. Okay? Please be honest. Please take no notice of the person sitting next to you, and please don't change your mind. Okay? Be honest, take no notice of the person sitting next to you, and don't change your mind, because they may have seen this already. So, you know, it's irrelevant what they do. Do what you do. Could I have my question up, please? Can I have my question up, please? Has he gone? No, not that one. There's a question should come up. You get, okay, we'll start the interview and we'll come back to that one because it's a good question and you can't afford to miss it. So give me a signal when the errant person is there. So Alex, really good to have you. Cambridge Analytica, you're renowned for all sorts of things, but can you tell us a little bit about the company and your role in it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cambridge Analytica is a data science consultancy that focuses on the communications and marketing industry. We're most famous for the work that we do in politics, but actually 70% of our revenue is from our brand and commercial work. It just so happens that no one writes a newspaper article about you if you do a particularly successful campaign for Pedigree Trump, but if you get Donald Trump elected, all of a sudden you're a household name. What we do is quite multidisciplinary. It all starts with primary audience research, big data analytics and modeling, data-driven creative strategies, all the way through to actually buying the media and executing a campaign. So in a way, we're a sort of end-to-end data-driven marketing agency. So as Chief Data Officer, I'm in charge of the data science, the engineering, the research, so the data-focused part of the company as opposed to the marketing agency part. And yeah, in that respect, we can...
So what did you do to become Chief Data Officer of a company like that? What's your background?
Well, so like most data scientists, I'm a PhD engineer or a physicist. Actually, I was a member of the founding team. So when Cambridge Analytica formed back in 2013, I was working in the oil industry. I and 2 friends of mine who were we were PhD students at Cambridge together. That's actually where the company got its name. Joined this little boutique research consultancy that was pivoting to become a data science company. And so joining as one of the original data scientists and building the original suite of models and then staying to build the team on this kind of dramatic journey we've been on is how I came to be in the present role.
So let's take the elephant in the room. Did you get Donald Trump elected or not?
So, I mean, it's a question everyone wants to ask.
It certainly is.
The truth about data science and addressable ad targeting is that it's not a panacea. It's not some piece of magic that can take an unelectable candidate and push them into office. What it can do is it makes a difference down where a race is going to be won or lost by a few tens of thousands of votes. Now, certainly Donald Trump lost the popular vote but won the Electoral College vote, and that is down in the margins where the work that we did certainly did make a difference. That said, 60 million people voted for the man. He obviously tapped into a deep-seated desire in that country for a change of government, and that's the wonderful thing about democracy. If people are unhappy with the way the country is being run, they've got the opportunity every 4 years to vote for a change. And at the end of the day, there was something there that needed to be addressed. So yes, it's one of our clients. We're very proud of the work that we did on that client. And certainly I'm happy to speak in detail about the work that we did.
And Brexit?
Brexit, we did not do any work on. And it's ironic, given what a controversial topic fake news being propagated by social media is. It's important not to forget that fake news isn't a new phenomena, that newspapers will very happily publish things that they know are false if they think it will generate more clicks or sell more newspapers. Then at the same time, when unexpected things happen, there's an inclination for people to look for a convenient explanation, something that helps them understand what's going on and explain away that fear and that worry. And so Brexit, much like the election of Donald Trump, took a lot of people by surprise. And being able to point the finger at something, being able to say big data, this mysterious thing that no one really understands, is responsible for this thing that I'm uncomfortable with, is something that's very comforting in a strange way to people. And it's a story that a lot of the media latched onto and propagated. But no, in fact, we didn't do any work on Brexit. We did pitch one of the campaigns that was running to receive the designation, to form the official out campaign. However, that party we were talking to didn't receive the designation, and we didn't do anything else in that cycle. The rest is just a
so we blew it on our own without the help of big data.
Yeah,
basically.
unfortunately.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, before jumping into this, is my question available yet? Guys? Sound desk? People? Is my question available yet? They're not even looking. Sorry. Is it ready? Yeah? Can you bring my question up? Helga, could you find the question? The guys don't know. Sorry. So, you describe e-commerce as having lost its path in segmentation and split testing. So, best practice for many people in e-commerce is to do split testing and to choose the best variant. You say that's e-commerce losing its path. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I can. I think programmatic optimization has obviously become a pretty standard thing for digital marketers to do every day. But there's been a lot of research over the last couple of years which has suggested that people don't feel like companies recognize them as individuals anymore. And a big part of that, it comes down to the fact that these companies are quite literally treating them as being numbers in an optimization routine. Whereas, of course, best practice selling, you don't talk about the product, you talk about the person, and you understand their need, you understand whether there's a fit between what they want and what they need and what you're selling, and then give them that personalized experience in order to get them across the line. And that's been lost in the process of trying to scale up marketing and communications using these off-the-shelf ad targeting technologies. So what we do as a company is we seek to go up a little bit further in the funnel, if you like, and we really start with a program of audience research, combining research at the respondent level with data from different sources, client first-party data, other publicly or commercially available third-party data sets. And then we use this information from a variety of different sources to give us information about different audience groups, what they want and what they need, what messaging they're going to engage with, and then we structure a communications campaign on that basis. And in that way, we're sort of avoiding this habit of just randomly testing different pieces of creative against different audience segments to see what works, because you're taking the time to understand those people before you try to communicate with them. And that's really what our modus operandi is as a company.
So there's an old John Wanamaker phrase that 50% of your marketing spend's wasted, we just don't know which 58%. And it feels like in online marketing, because of this, 98.5% of our online spend's wasted, we just don't know which 98.5%. Can you help understand which 1.5% is relevant? And is that the kind of thing that you do?
It is part of what we do. I think that quote's really referring to the opacity that exists in the industry, and there's a few reasons why it's opaque, which pieces of creative and which segments are converting and which ones aren't. And it's down to the fact that you've got a whole myriad of different platforms and systems between the advertiser who's paying to run the campaign and the audience that's receiving it across different publisher networks. And being able to get accurate attribution data, so a knowledge of what's working and what isn't, back to the advertiser or the agency who's running the campaign is what's required in order to know what's working and to switch off the things that aren't. And there's a few different reasons why that's difficult. And what's really needed in an industry like travel is for those businesses who have got data offering this sort of cross-market perspective, so these are people like price comparison or booking websites, to syndicate those data about which clicks are turning into conversions back to the advertiser, so that they do know which part of their advertising spend is converting and which isn't, and can optimize their campaign on that basis.
So travel's traditionally not shared a lot of data. Do you find in other industries people do share that kind of data?
More and more, I think people who are in possession of very rich and very broad attribution data are starting to be aware of the value of those data to a marketer. And the opportunity to monetize those insights is a very compelling thing, which is unlocking data from these different silos. I'm sure it's going to happen in travel sooner or later, hopefully sooner.
So you were talking about addressing individuals rather than segments or averages. How do you go about doing that as a company? What's your method?
So, I mean, you're still addressing segments, but that segment is, of course, made up of individuals. And then it's about putting people, individual people, in the right segments together with people who are similar to them, such that when you do go off to run a campaign on Facebook or through your DMP, you're giving people creative that they're going to engage with. But really, at a high level, it all starts with data and research. As I mentioned before, it's first-party primary research that you will go off and run. So design a survey, recruit sample from a panel, get your client to push a survey out through a mailing list where they might have people opted in to receive communication from them. Match those data back to other data sets. So clients will often have what we call very deep but very narrow data existing in their own CRM, in their inbound and outbound marketing platforms. So these tend to be data that cover every touch point that client has with their customers. When those very deep and narrow first-party data are joined together with what we call very broad but shallow demographic and socioeconomic and consumer and lifestyle data, which can come from places as disparate as licensing it from companies like Axiom or Experian, who get those data in through from their own network of partnerships, or even things as simple as enriching your data at some geographic level of granularity with census information. That brings a lot of breadth and context about individuals. And then from the combination of those two types of data, the deep and narrow with the broad and shallow, the contextual, with the research that gives you something actionable and insightful, layered on top of that. So from the combination of three different independent sources, you've got all of the ingredients that you need to go off and use a machine learning algorithm to do something like extrapolate out some of the insights from the research to know which segment you ought to place people in. And having done that extrapolation and that segmentation exercise, you can take those audience groups, have a team of creatives interpret what the most effective way to communicate with each segment is, and this is exactly what we do. We've got a team of behavioral scientists who both contribute to the research design as well as the interpretation of the outset of the output to help our clients understand what image and what tone and what narrative to use to engage these different segments. And then you take your audience groups, onboard them as a custom audience to Facebook or to your DMP, or onboard your research sample and do quick online lookalikes, and run your online campaign in much the same way as a best-in-class digital agency would, but you're starting with a different set of ingredients that just give people a completely different experience in engaging with your brand. Okay.
If what you're trying to sell is not a brilliant product, can you put lipstick on the pig and make an unsellable product sellable?
It's not about tricking people into buying something that they otherwise wouldn't. I mean, the truth is you might be able to run a trial campaign where you get people to look at your product or click through and hit a landing page and then engage and install your app. If the product's no good, though, it's not going to stick. and all that money that you've just spent on acquisition is going to be wasted. So, yeah, you might be able to drive some shorter-term engagement by doing something really clever with your outreach, but the money would probably be better spent fixing the fundamental problem.
Well, I'm sure some of you are still slightly skeptical, so I'm going to try my experiment now. Could I have my question up, please? Okay. Remember, be honest, take no notice of the person sitting next to you, and don't change your mind. How many F's are in this sentence, okay? So have a look at it, and I'm going to ask the people who see 3 F's, and 3 F's only, to please stand up. I know, yeah, please. If you see 3 F's, and, yeah, please don't be shy. Please don't be shy. 3 F's and 3 F's only, please. I know there are more of you. I feel it. There are more of you, I can see there are more. Thank you, please sit down. If there are people who see 4 F's and 4 F's only, please stand up. Thank you, I know there are a few more of you. Any more? Thank you. Those who see 5 F's and 5 F's only, please stand up. Ah, thank you. Thank you very much. Please sit down. Those who see 6 F's and 6 F's only, please stand up. Ah, thank you. Those who see 7 F's and no, there aren't 7 F's, there aren't 7 F's. So you probably think you're really good as a data analyst, but we cannot get agreement among this group as to how many F's there are in this sentence, which somehow shows that you don't need to have people who are product managers who already know their own data too well trying to derive patterns. The O and the F is very hard to see. The brain doesn't see it very well, and so proofreaders read those backwards. But our algorithms would probably not have missed that very often. But it's a stupid illustration, but somehow, if you are looking at data that you're too familiar with, you won't derive those patterns from it, and you will make mistakes in it. So it needs data science, it needs algorithms to work out some of these things. That was an aside. That would have been a good introduction, but never mind, never mind. So can you describe for us a typical engagement? How does it start, how does it go through, and what kind of results do you get at the end?
Sure. It can be very varied. So as I sort of alluded to, what we do is really the work of 4 or 5 different agencies, conventionally a market research agency, maybe an analytics consultancy, a creative agency, your below-the-line agency. We also buy TV in America. And for smaller clients, probably up to maybe $100, $200 million a year turnover, what we find is that they really like just having one vendor to deal with to do all of those things. They don't have an in-house performance marketing team already managing their own media buys, and they've potted with research before, and they've got a load of data, but they don't know what to be doing with it. So it's really exciting for them to have a one-stop shop that can do all of these things and break down the walls between those barriers. For other clients, typically bigger clients, either they're well wedded to their agency or they've got their in-house team, and then they'll engage with us to run a segmentation exercise, or maybe do some modeling and analytics for them, or some more fairly specific piece of work. So the engagement's very varied, but typically in the former case, where we're able to do everything soup to nuts, it would look something like start off by engaging with the client to understand what data they have in their organization and what they're already doing with it, design a survey, push out the sample, integrate, hygiene their data, match it together with external data sources, do the modeling and the analytics, interact with their creative agency to get the right pieces of creative cut, and then go off to actually onboard and buy the media, and do the measurement of effectiveness and the attribution.
So is there anything really new in that, or is it just amplified speed and bigger sets of data than has been traditional direct marketing and online marketing?
Yeah,
or is it something completely different?
The main differentiator that we have in terms of the work that we do is definitely the behavioral sciences focus. This is something that a lot has been written about in politics. I often don't lead conversations with it because I don't like people to get fixated on it and then not really understand the breadth of what we do as a company. But SCL, which was the parent company of Cambridge Analytica, actually started life as a behavioral sciences think tank with some academics at UCL in London. And these academics were looking for ways to commercialize the research that they were doing into applied psychology and see how they could be used in commercial marketing campaigns. And so we've still got this very strong basis of intellectual property in the company about the behavioral drivers that make people respond to the world around them in the way that they do. And so we've got a team of psychologists in the company who sit within our research division, and when we're putting together a research instrument to probe which people are likely to engage with what sorts of messaging or product, they will generate a hypothesis about what psychological traits are going to be very powerful or very useful in this particular study. We'll probe those alongside the other more conventional behavioral or attitudinal questions to derive quite a very fundamental basis for audience segmentation that also gives us very powerful clues in terms of knowing how to cut the creative for those particular audiences. And having that behavioral sciences focus in there would probably be our main differentiator as an agency.
So you influence politics and you influence commerce. It sounds like the ultimate capitalist dream. Is it really dangerous? Do you have a set of values as a company and say there are things we wouldn't influence?
Yeah, absolutely. In both politics and commerce, it's the same set of transferable technologies. It's all research, data science, data interpreted creative, and mostly levering off third-party ad tech technology for getting the right message to the right person. So just to be really clear, what we don't do is Twitter bots propagating fake news or all of these other ridiculous things that people have talked about that have influenced the election in the paper. It is fairly conventional sorts of technologies, albeit with the behavioral sciences twist. But in terms of the morality that we have as a company, in politics, we only work in countries that are running free and fair elections. We only work for parties who have got some hope of commanding a popular majority, so we don't work for fringe parties.
French parties. Sorry.
Fringe parties, right. Thank you. So to give an example of that, we only contracted with Trump for America after he had already won the Republican Party's nomination. So in doing that, commanded a very substantial proportion of the vote. And so with that being our guiding ethos in politics, it's also worth mentioning that we're an apolitical company. Each year around the world, we do somewhere between 7 and 10 national elections for left and for right. It just so happens that in America, back in 2013, there was an opportunity on the right because the Republicans were losing the technical arms race to the Democrats, and they were underserved in terms of tech companies. So we saw an opportunity and we took it. But around the world, we work for liberal candidates as much as we do for conservative ones. Obviously, the ultimate check in the balance is the people who work for the company. I think if the management, not that we were to try to take on a contract that was too morally dreadful, the staff would refuse to work on it, and rightfully so. Unless
you'd somehow persuaded them through messaging in the pay slips or whatever.
Yeah, but again, you're starting to sound like a journalist from The Observer.
Absolutely. Well, exactly. So data's going to change in May this year with GDPR.
Absolutely.
What kind of implications does that have for your work?
GDPR is an enormous opportunity for a company like ours. I know regulatory compliance isn't the most sexy topic for people to have to think about, but it really can't be understated what an enormous change this new law coming in from the 25th of May is going to be for the industry. Probably the biggest implications of this new law for individuals in the public is things like requirements around the right to access and data portability and the right to erasure. So what this means is that any individual can go to a company which is holding personal information on them, so that is information which they as an individual can be identified by. It doesn't have to be your name and address. If you can be uniquely identified, that's classed as being personal information about you. And you'll have the right to say to that company, give me a copy of those data. Oops, lost me. No. In a machine-readable format, and remove me from your database. Which means that if you want to change supermarkets, say, I don't know any German supermarkets, you would go to, in the UK, we'll say Tesco, and say, give me my entire Tesco Club Card file and take me away from your data set, and you could take those data and give them to Sainsbury's. And they would straight away have that entire supermarket shopping history. So those data now become yours to control and manage and monetize as you should so wish. And what's that going to mean is that a lot of companies who are at the moment making a lot of money from monetizing other people's data are now looking at a really fundamental change in the way their businesses operate. And this is everyone from supermarket loyalty cards through to the world of online ad targeting. So under GDPR, cookie IDs, mobile device IDs, the sorts of things that DMPs currently use and syndicate for audience targeting are being classified as personal information, and you'll have the right to go and reclaim those data and stop them from using them to target you. And already products are popping up that will allow people to syndicate their own data and sharing some of the wealth which is being generated from the world of data-driven targeting. So to answer your question, for us, that's an enormous opportunity. Cambridge Analytica as a company don't own any data of our own. We're a consultancy. We work with data from different sources. And from our perspective, the opportunity to get more data up and out of commercial data silos and into people's hands where they want to do things with it is an opportunity for us to help people derive insight from their own data and to have avenues for monetizing those data. So we're very excited about it.
Cool. And speaking of monetizing your data, have you done any applications in travel, any consultancy jobs in travel?
Yeah, we've done a fair bit in the travel industry. We've worked with airlines, helping them gain market share. We've worked with a couple of big hotel chains, helping them segment and personalize their CRMs such that when they're doing things like email pushes to get people to rebook, they've got subject lines that drive more opens and more clicks and more bookings. Probably the most exciting players in the travel space from our perspective are the big price comparison or booking sites. These are companies which have got such a wealth of data covering the entire market that there's a lot of really exciting things that they can do about profiling different traveler segments and then serving them appropriate content, both for their own purposes and on the behalf of other companies.
And if you were a travel company just starting down this road, where would you begin?
It definitely begins in your own backyard. So the first conversation we have with any new client is around what data they have within the walls of their own company and what they're currently doing with it. If you're not extracting the immediate value out of your own data, be it for business intelligence or optimizing your supply chain or even just doing like really the bare basics of data-driven outbound marketing using, then you're missing a trick. So it would all start with that sort of 80-20 around how to get best use out of the data that you already possess, before then trying to do something clever with bringing in other data sets, running research, and optimizing on that basis.
And any really good books that you could recommend for people who are interested in getting a foothold in this subject without being a data scientist, but just to whet their appetite around this whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver is a really nice, gentle introduction to some of the sort of concepts around data science and how useful it can be. Otherwise, on the behavioral sciences side, there's a great book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Dan Kahneman, came out sort of 5 or 6 years ago. This really references the idea that there's what they call System 1 and System 2 thinking. System 1 thinking being your fast, unconscious mind that's used for everyday spontaneous decision making. System 2 is the more slowly thinking, cognitive, rational mind. And the really interesting thing for the travel industry is that travel is, of course, it's a very deeply personal thing. It's often quite a significant purchase. It's one of the relatively few examples of System 2 thinking that you can find, and then the sort of different ideas about how you need to communicate with these people who are thinking very carefully about where they're going to take the next holiday and whether it's more important to fly premium economy or having a nicer room. And then the research that they do and the data that generates, it's a huge opportunity to really start to engage with your audiences on a more meaningful basis.
So it sounds like, to bring the whole thing around, it sounds like you're using data to prove creative rather than eliminating creative.
Yeah, indisputably. So definitely to say creative advertising is dead is a stretch too far. But what it's really about is making it an educated guess rather than a stab in the dark. So starting with a really fundamental understanding of your audience and how to best communicate with them, and then using that to inform the creative. And then at the other end, technologies like responsive creative rendering is really maturing. You still need to start with those seed pieces of creative, but if they're not quite right, then you can programmatically change them just to wring those extra few percent of clicks out of your target audiences.
Cool. Okay, and final thing, if you were a data scientist who had to go to a desert island, what luxury would you take?
That's a great question. Definitely nothing with a battery, because it's only going to last about 10 hours, and then you'll be by yourself. I'd probably take a really long book and go old
and you'd
school
count
with
all
it.
the words.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
Right.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. I hope that you've got an appreciation of some of the things that you can start to do, and you'll be around afterwards if people want to come and grill you and get him to predict what you're going to do next. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.